Officer William Elliot, July 3, 1892. On July 3, 1892, shortly after midnight, the Tucson Police Department suffered its first line-of-duty death when Officer William Elliot was stabbed to death, attempting to arrest Santos Alvarado, a notorious criminal. Officer Elliot was on foot patrol in the Barrio Libre area of downtown Tucson when he confronted Alvarado on Meyer Avenue, between McCormick and Cushing, directly in front of Mayor Maish's house. Alvarado had just come from Phoenix and was reportedly a hard character who had figured prominently in a number of serious crimes throughout Sonora. Two witnesses stated that Alvarado yelled, "Shoot me if you want to, you can't arrest me." Officer Elliot fired a warning shot, but Alvarado charged him and buried a knife into his heart. Officer Elliot was still able to fire a shot and mortally wounded Alvarado. Officer Elliot died in the arms of Mayor Maish, who had come outside when he heard the shots being fired. Officer Elliot was an officer for only a few months at the time of the incident and was survived by his wife and 2 children. Officer William Katzenstein, July 26, 1902. On July 26, 1902, the Tucson Police Department lost its second officer in the line of duty. Between 11 p.m. and midnight, there was a fire in a store on South Meyer Avenue near Broadway Boulevard. Officer William Katzenstein was on patrol nearby when he heard the alarm alerting citizens of the fire. He rushed to the scene, as did hundreds of other people. Officer Katzenstein had to physically prevent people from taking objects from the store and keep them back from the fire. Officer Katzenstein was also the assistant fire chief, so he went to the Occidental to remove his gun, leaving it with the clerk. He then went to the corner of Broadway and Meyer and began opening the fire plug. It was at this time that Theodoro Elias moved up behind Officer Katzenstein. Elias had been stalking the officer for some time because Katzenstein had arrested his friend some 5 weeks earlier. Just a few hours before the fire, Elias had wagered with several of his companions that Katzenstein would be dead before midnight. Elias saw that Officer Katzenstein had removed his gun, and Elias fired 2 shots. The first shot hit Officer Katzenstein in the ear and dazed him. He fell to the ground, but got back up. He had no weapon to defend himself, and Elias fired again, striking Katzenstein just beneath the right eye. He fell to the ground and died in the arms of a doctor who was only 10 feet away when the shots were fired. Elias was pursued from the scene and captured on the steps of the courthouse. Officer Katzenstein was an officer for 2 years and was survived by his wife and daughter. Officer Robert Cummins, September 7, 1936. The Tucson Police Department lost its 3rd officer on September 7, 1936, in an on-duty motorcycle accident. On September 3, 1936, Officer Robert Cummins and a group of TPD motorcycle officers were in Phoenix participating in an escort for an American League convention parade. Officer Cummins was on his way back to Tucson with the other officers when his motorcycle skidded on loose gravel at the intersection of Van Buren and 16th Street in Phoenix. He suffered serious injuries and was transported to a Phoenix area hospital. He regained consciousness only once in the hospital, recognizing his wife, and then slipped into a coma. He succumbed to his injuries 4 days after the accident. The chief of police and all members of the Tucson Police Department who were not on duty went to Phoenix to escort the body of Officer Cummins back to Tucson. Officer Cummins had served 10 years with the Border Patrol prior to becoming a Tucson police officer, a position he held for only 9 months before the accident. He was survived by his wife and 4 children. Officer Barry Hendrix, October 28, 1974. In October of 1974, the department would lose their 4th officer in the line of duty. Officer Barry Hendrix had been assigned to the Metropolitan Area Narcotics Squad for a little more than a year. On October 28, 1974, he had arranged to buy 2 ounces of heroin from an occupant of a second-floor apartment at the Colony Apartments on 8th Street. After making the deal, Officer Hendrix left with a small quantity of heroin to confirm its authenticity. Upon confirmation, he returned after 5 minutes with 9 other agents and a deputy county attorney to conduct a warrantless search based on probable cause. Officer Hendrix led the group and forced open the door. 2 suspects ran into the bedroom. Officer Hendrix opened the bedroom door, and one of the suspects, Rufus Mincy, opened fire, striking Officer Hendrix. Officer Hendrix fell backward, slamming the door shut, at the same time returning fire and striking both Mincy and the other suspect. Other officers forced open the door and apprehended Mincy, who offered no further resistance. Officer Hendrix was transported to University Hospital, where he died within 1 hour of the incident. Officer Hendrix had been a police officer for 5 years and was survived by his parents and sister. Officer James Smith, October 28, 1980. Officer James Smith was responding Code 3 with lights and siren to a reported motor vehicle accident on the morning of October 28, 1980. He was traveling on his police motorcycle in the reversible middle lane on Speedway near the intersection of Plummer Avenue when the rear of his motorcycle was grazed by a station wagon that was changing lanes. Officer Smith was thrown into the eastbound center lane, where he was struck by an eastbound vehicle. Officer Smith was pronounced dead at the scene, making him the 5th TPD officer lost in the line of duty. Officer Smith had served in the United States Air Force prior to joining the police department, where he had served for 4 years prior to the incident. Officer Smith is survived by his wife and 2 children. Officer Jeffrey Ross, February 18, 1982. Officer Jeffrey Ross was serving as a member of the Metro Area Narcotics Squad when on the evening of February 18, 1982, he was involved in an investigation at the Ranch House Bar, located at 4950 North Casa Grande Highway. Officer Ross led a group of officers into the back room of the bar in order to arrest the bar's manager, Clifford Hamilton. As Officer Ross entered the room, Hamilton fired 1 round, which struck Officer Ross in the chest. The other officers returned fire, killing Hamilton. Officer Ross was transported to University Hospital, where he succumbed to his wound in just 17 minutes after his arrival to the emergency room. Officer Ross had served the citizens of Tucson for 4 years and is survived by his wife. Officer Patrick K. Hardesty, May 26, 2003. On Memorial Day 2003, Officer Patrick K. Hardesty responded to a hit-and-run collision in the 800 block of East Fort Lowell Road. As a result of his investigation, he responded to a nearby residence with another officer to look for the suspect. Officer Hardesty made contact with the subject, later identified as Juan Montenegro Cruz. As he was questioning Cruz and attempting to ascertain his identity, Cruz fled from Officer Hardesty on foot. Officer Hardesty gave chase and advised via radio that he was in pursuit. The other officer on scene, who was dealing with the individuals inside the house, left the residence to assist Officer Hardesty. A few minutes later, the assisting officer located Cruz and detained him pending further investigation. Other responding officers then found Officer Hardesty in the backyard of a nearby residence. He had been shot 3 times. He was transported to University Medical Center, where he succumbed to his wounds. Officer Hardesty served in the United States Marine Corps for 20 years and as a reserve officer with the Tucson Police Department for 12 years, prior to becoming a full-time officer, a status he held for just 1 year prior to this incident. He is survived by his wife and 3 children. Officer Eric Height, June 2nd, 2008. On Sunday, June 1st, 2008, at 10:22 a.m., officers from the Tucson Police Department engaged in the vehicle pursuit of a suspect who had only minutes earlier fired a rifle into the homes of 2 neighbors in the county and fled as the first Pima County Sheriff's deputy arrived at the location. As the deputy pursued him, Nick Delich opened fire and wounded the deputy. Members of the Tucson Police Department spotted the vehicle a short time later in the city limits and initiated their own pursuit, despite the fact Delich continued firing at pursuing officers. At the intersection of Tankaverde Road and Tomahawk Trail, the suspect turned a blind corner, stopped, and waited to ambush pursuing officers with his assault rifle. Officer Eric D. Height was the first officer to come around the corner, and the suspect opened fire, striking the police vehicle several times, with one round striking Officer Height. Delich continued to flee and wounded another sheriff's deputy before finally surrendering. Officer Height succumbed to his injury on June 2, 2008. Officer Height served with the United States Air Force for 21 years before becoming a Tucson police officer, where he had served for 4 years prior to this incident. Officer Height is survived by his wife and 2 children.